So let's take a look at another experiment that reveals some differences between the autistic mind and the typically developing mind. And this is in the area of word learning. Parents of autistic children sometimes report that the first word that their autistic child learns is an unusual word. Not the typical words like mama or dada or those types of things, but something unusual. And more generally, that just the whole word learning process happens differently for autistic children. Simon Baron-Cohen set up an experiment to investigate that. And you'll recall that we have learned about joint attention, and that's this linking of attention between, say, adult and child, so as to facilitate information transfer. Right. So, in other words, the mother and the child will fixate on each other's eyes and then shift to the object of interest, and they will check each other to make sure they are both looking at the same object. And we can see that this would be useful in a word learning environment, right? So here's mama says cat, right? And when mama says cat, the idea is the kid is looking at the cat, right? So in the kid's brain, you're getting the kind of coactivity of the sound cat and the visual representation of the cat, and then the brain can link those two together. But that works because the joint attention is going to sort of make it more likely that the word cat is in fact happening in the brain at the same time the kid is looking at the cat, right? So we can see how joint attention then can facilitate word learning. So what Baron-Cohen did was set up what he called a discrepant looking paradigm. So what you do is you have the person who is going to utter a word in the environment, in earshot of the subject of the experiment, but there might be two different items in the environment, right? And so you can have the teacher, in a sense, say the word cat when the teacher's looking at the cat here, but you structure it so that the child or the subject is looking at something else. Now, in reality, a lot of these types of experiments on word learning are done with new words. So, there's no previous exposure to the word, and so you're learning some new association between a sound and an object in the world. But just to illustrate here we have mom is looking at the cat and the kid is looking at the snake. Mom says cat, but the kid, because it's looking at the snake here, it poses a question for the researchers here. What's going to happen in the brain, right? Is the sound cat going to be linked with what mom is looking at or what the kid is looking at, right? And what the researchers found was, what Baron-Cohen and his colleagues found, was that typically developing children, even though there might be two different objects, typically developing children tended to associate the word cat with what the mother was looking at, not what the child might have been looking at, whereas autistic individuals tended to associate the sound cat, the word cat, with what the autistic child was looking at when the sound occurred, right? And so if we think about that, even if a child is looking at something different from their mother, a typically developing child will understand that when she utters the sound, it's likely to be related with what she is looking at, not with what the child is looking at. And that kind of presupposes an understanding of the mother's mentality, how her mind is operating, that she intends this sound to be linked to that object, right? Whereas in the autistic individual, it's as if the brain, lacking that kind of understanding, the brain is just associating the sound cat with whatever was also going on in the brain, in this case, the visual representation of the snake. So again, we see that autistic individuals have deficits in joint attention, so they're not going to be able to take advantage of this capacity that can facilitate word learning. And joint attention does sort of presuppose an understanding that there is, there's that shared intentionality. There is a point to this whole interaction, right? There's going to be some information transfer, and both individuals are trying to link up their attention so as to facilitate that information transfer. Autistic children seem to be challenged by that notion. They seem to have difficulty with joint attention, and consequently, word learning proceeds abnormally.